Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you have had a wonderful week so far. Today, I have for you what I deem to be the best wildcard drop. Now, there's a lot of talk about wildcard 10 compared to what was suspected. There's talk about playing it early instead of 12. There's talk about playing in other windows, all of which we will discuss in this video. And then, of course, if you are going to wildcard Haaland, no Haaland, what other players should we include, etc., etc. I've got all of that covered. Before we hop into the video, 50% of you who watch regularly aren't subscribed. So if you could do so, I would be very appreciative as we approach 4,000. And we are very, very close to that feat, which would be such a magnificent thing to achieve at this stage. Nothing else needs to be said, however, so let's get into the video. Before we hop into the team, let's talk a bit about the wildcard strategy overall and when's the best time to use it. Now, if you watched my transfer plans video, you would have seen I was quite hot on wildcard 10 initially. That interest has significantly cooled. Now, I'm not going to speak about my team too much because that's what the team selection's for and this is not what you came for. But it is just to say overall that I am not as bullish on it as I once was for a few reasons we are going to discuss now. Number one, I think on Sunday I was so high on having Cole Palmer in the side. But now I think, now that I've probably calmed down a little and assessed things from a more objective standpoint, I realized that especially Man United without Ten Hag, which means they won't have that huge space in the middle for Palmer to exploit. They'll almost definitely go to a game model which is Shaw in the middle. He's not that great of an asset then this week potentially because going to Old Trafford could always be tough. You never know what they're going to cook up. And then, of course, you have Arsenal after, right? So does it not make so much more sense to get him in 12 and allow the team to essentially flourish maybe without him? Maybe it's a really good differential to go without him. And sometimes that's a bit of a hidden differential, I think, to go without players. So that's one thing I significantly called on Palmer. Then just generally, the fixture swing in 12's a lot bigger. And the other thing is, I was looking at game week 14 for a potential wildcard, and I noticed there was a fixture swing there with the likes of West Ham and Villa and Newcastle. And wildcarding closer to that, bridging the gap so that at least you can plan for it far easier, makes a lot of sense to me as well because the likes of Bowen, Isaac, Watkins, they're all players in 14 around then that I really, really like. And then, of course, Chelsea's good fixture run starts there. And could you potentially just go Man United assets in 11 via free transfers? And could you also then keep Haaland for 10 and 11, where I would say he's the best captain option? And that is something that Wildcard 10 loses out on. In my opinion, it loses out on the best captain option in Wildcard in Game Week 11. And do you really need to do that? Is that the best usage of your Wildcard? I would say probably not. So for me, I've really cooled my interest. I do think 12 now looks a lot stronger than I did initially as a way to offload Haaland. But now let's get into the team. Now you will see that I've ditched sells. And for those of you who've been following my channel, you know that's a pretty big deal for me as I've been promoting sell supremacy all the way since preseason and a very early stage of it. So why have I done that? Well, one thing about this team is it's built with the long term in mind. It is not a short term team. Hence why you will see certain things which you may not like for the game weeks in the immediate future. And why have I done that? Well, around the Christmas period, there's always more injuries, there's always more rotation, expected minutes risk, and I'm trying to build a squad that is essentially bulletproof to that to the best extent possible, while still being able to use free transfers aggressively so that I don't have to constantly patch up things which are getting undone and use them for the likes of Bowen, Isaac, and Watkins, as I discussed. So I've really made this team with the idea of using free transfers down the line in an aggressive sense, as opposed to defensive and just capturing short-term upside and then just having to go through the pain of not having a deep squad. And you will see that there is no Haaland. And I actually want to speak about this before we get onto anything else, more so in terms of a structural perspective. There is no Haaland because I think there is no point to wildcard now and then also have Haaland on your side. Because realistically, how much are you changing? Okay, maybe you really, really want Salah this week and you don't have him and you don't really have a route to him. Well, then I would just fade him because I'm not wildcarding to have one player in one specific week. Even if I did want to captain him, I don't think it's that big a deal. And if you want him that badly, just take a hit. You can probably get him with a hit, right? Whereas Haaland, a no Haaland draft requires mass restructuring. And hence why you would use a wildcard for something like that. You would use it for a big change because that's the purpose of it. It's to completely shift your team and capture a lot of upside that otherwise you wouldn't have been exposed to. Hence why this team doesn't have Haaland, because I just don't think it's viable or it's very difficult to justify a wildcard when you still have Haaland in your side in that drop. So the reason I've gone for Sanchez is the long-term value I get out of him. From 12, the fixture run is magnificent. He'll play this week, and Fabianski will play next week. And you know what? If Fabianski doesn't play, so be it. At least Sanchez's save volume at home to Arsenal will be really high. Do I expect him to keep a clean sheet in that? No, which is why I'm benching him in the first place. Whereas Sells, he's got Arsenal in game week 12. He's got City in game week 14, and then it's like Villa United afterwards. So surely getting Sanchez, who's got a good fixture in 12, 14, and then in 16 onwards, it's really good. So that's why I've gone for Sanchez. He's only 0.1 more expensive. He's also got a high ceiling, as he showcased this season against West Ham. Obviously, the game against Bournemouth as well, but that's slightly skewed, I guess, by the penalty. But it's a pretty nice rotation in the short term, and Sanchez gives me upside in the long term and a really good fixture run. Right, now, let's start with the bench of the defense, actually, and specifically Diogo Dalot. Why do I have him? Now, he's a huge differential. Obviously, Ten Hag's been sacked, and Ruben Amorim is the favourite to come in and play his back three, which means in some capacity you have wing backs. Dalot is one of the more underrated players, I think, in the league. His technical quality, especially his technical quality, he's so good on the ball. And Ronaldo's put him as one player that he thought was massively underrated and could have a really good career. And that's quite a big deal. You'll say, like, oh, maybe he's not the smartest man in the game. Maybe he's not Pep Guardiola. Okay, fine. But he definitely knows a lot about football. And he is a smart person in my books and someone who knows a lot about football. So when he comes out and says that publicly, I definitely took notice of that. And I've seen it with my own eyes. I really do like Diogo Dalot as a player. And I think had United not been performing so poorly, he would have got a better media rep than he has so far. And there's a reason he won Player of the Year at the club, right ahead of Bruno Fernandes in a season where it was fairly competitive by their own standards. Not obviously usual top six standards, but nonetheless. So that fixture on Leicester, Ipswich, Everton, with him playing in a really attacking role, there's points there. And a back three in general, and United's the makeup of United sides, they can grind out clean sheets. I've seen it before, and I know that this squad, when optimized or even close to optimized, will definitely be one that is not the easiest to score goals past, especially under a wing-back type of system. So I've got Dalot for some short-term upside, and then you can, by all means, move him on. Van der Berg, I mean, starting 4.0, the fixture runs are not too bad in the Christmas period, so I think having him there is nice cover, and obviously dirt cheap. Ainori is self-explanatory, right? He's a 4.5 who fits with my preferred structure in terms of having at least one. I know I've only got one here. Normally, I'd be advocating for two or even three, but with no Haaland, you could definitely spread the fronts elsewhere. That's kind of the purpose of it, I guess. And yeah, I mean, with that run and his attacking qualities, there's no reason not to have him. He's just an easy long-term hold. These two, well, I think Gabriel might surprise you. And my thinking is here, like I told you, I am planning for the long term. When Saliba's back, when Odegaard's back as well, and they're just clicking better, when Calafiori's fit, when the whole squad's fit, basically, and that probably won't be in too long, they'll be back to being one of the best defensive units in the world, if not the best defensive unit in the world. And I think having the biggest box threat in the best set-piece taking team makes sense. You've already got value accumulated in him. If it goes wrong, which you very well can, you'll have to get him back at a far more expensive price. And the other thing is, he's not one that's easy to get back. It's not easy to get premium defenders in when you look at most structures. So I think getting him early and just keeping him there when I know that I have a good floor in terms of clean sheet probabilities every game and a high ceiling every game because of his box threat is nice. Gvardiol, I'm thinking I might just keep him for pretty much forever. The open play threat is so big. He's so good in terms of his ball striking, in terms of his ability to manufacture a shot in the first place, how good he is in small spaces, that there's so many little avenues to points. In an era where everyone's conceding goals because of the way they're playing, it just makes a lot of sense to have the guy who's got the biggest goal threat. And for me, out of the defenders, it might genuinely be him. So I'm more than happy to have him. I also think in the tougher run, which City have, which is why some people are selling Haaland, that's the games he'll play the more advanced role. So yeah, sure, clean sheets might not be a plenty, but there will be attacking output almost undoubtedly. And City are City. They can keep a clean sheet against pretty much anyone as long as they don't concede too many dangerous transitions. Right, now I already knew what the comments were going to look like had I shown you the midfield, shown you the forward line without discussing this man, because as you can imagine, he is excluded from the side. Now I know you will love him because he's been getting a bunch of points for you, and I understand that. But for me, at the price tag now, I don't want him in my wildcard team. That is not to say he's not a very good asset. I have not denied that ever for 1 second. I've always said that if possible, I'd like to have him. He just didn't fit in with my plans or my structure. But now, I would say, even with a free shot at him, I don't want him. And the main reason for that is I'm not in love with these fixtures. I don't think Fulham away is that easy because they're one side that I still think, especially through the middle, find it difficult to transition because they don't have huge ball carriers in Andreas Pereira and ESR. So they when they are going to transition, it's not always going to be super clean. And when they're going to do so, it's going to be largely through Robinson down the left flank, but he's a fullback. You have to remember that. So mainly it's Adama, right? And Adama is Adama, so that's very self-explanatory. Which means that I don't see them getting as high up the pitch, thus transitioning on them when they're transitioning almost. Some form of counter-attacking, I guess you could describe it as, is unlikely. And I think in those open game states, that's where Mbeumo really, really thrives because he is such a good technician. Fulham also will be quite a physical game. And I think that Brentford's fixture run in recent times has been very kind to them and not an overly physical run. He got points against West Ham, not overly physical. Ipswich, certainly not overly physical. And I just wonder, especially away at Bournemouth, that could be slightly more challenging. Bournemouth will be another physical challenge. And to be fair, this is a decent fixture because I've spoken about Bournemouth home and away being completely different. And Bournemouth are going to engage in a aggressive affair like an attacking affair, just like Brentford love to do, right? That's one of the reasons he's been so good because there's just complete chaos in every Brentford game given their style. Everton away is never going to be the greatest fixture from an attacking standpoint, just with the way they play. And Branthwaite will be back by then for sure, and they'll be far surer. And I just don't like that either. So can you see why, at least to me, at 7.7, I'm not overly attracted to the prospect? Now, I know all the good things, all the fundamentals he has, Brentford's game model, which supports him in terms of doing well on platforms and well for FPL, his technical ability himself, penalty, set pieces, and the fact that Brentford are a good set piece team and have big box threat. I get all of that. But I can't have them all, right? And I have to make sacrifices somewhere. And for me, personally, if I'm going to have to sacrifice a mil or two here, I'm going to do it on Bryan Mbeumo. I also think it serves as a really nice differential not to have them. Because realistically, this is someone that people will not sell. They will have other problems in their team, and they will not see this as someone to get out of because they'll look at Leicester at home in game week 13 and be like, okay, we can attack that. And that is a great fixture. But outside of that, I don't love it. And I think this could serve as a really good differential not to have. I expect him to get points, just maybe nowhere near the rate he's currently doing so. And as such, I'm personally happy to fade. Right, now this would be the real reason for you to wildcard and take out Erling Haaland to facilitate a midfield like this. We'll touch on the three premiums afterwards. Let's start with Garnacho and Rodgers. Now, when facilitating a wildcard draft like this, and I think if you are going to wildcard without Haaland, it makes a lot of sense to get three premiums in the midfield. You have to have some form of a budget enabler, right? It's not just like because Haaland is so expensive, everyone else is really cheap. Like, no, Palmer costs basically 11 million now. Salah's not too far off 13, Saka's 10, etc. So Rodgers is here as a facilitator. Another thing I touched on earlier was having depth in the squad and not having to use transfers to constantly patch up problems, but rather use them aggressively. And having the likes of Rodgers there, a guy who's going to get very, very good minutes over a sustained period of time, who's playing in a role which is definitely geared towards delivering some form of output and has got really good quality and the fixture on turn soon, well, it makes a lot of sense for you to own him, especially when you've got so much value stored in him. So that's why he's there. Garnacho is there for similar reasons to Dallo. I think in game weeks 11, in game weeks 12 and 13, he's a magnificent differential to have. The fixtures are there, and he's shown to be someone who can rack up 90 minutes after 90 minutes a game. Great engine on him, very robust body and very available. And the other thing is he's got genuine goal threat, genuine open play goal threat. And that's always really important to me when I'm picking a midfielder. So at his price, I think it's a wonderful opportunity for those 3 weeks. And then you just hop off him. And I think you just keep doing that. Or you use him as part of a double move to go elsewhere. I spoke about Bowen in 14, right? This fixture ends in 13. Why don't you just hop onto Bowen in 14? You can downgrade pretty much anywhere you want. And I think there was a little bit of the money spares, like 0.4. So Bowen's 7.4, Garnacho 6.2. That's 0.8 you need to make up. You can make that up pretty much anywhere, given the makeup of the squad. Fantastic, right? So that's why he's in there. Now, the three premiums are going to be a reliable source of points on a consistent basis, and that too with high ceilings. So there'll be holes. So not just scattered in and around there, but at a very frequent basis. And that's what you're getting. You're getting a huge security of points. And this type of floor has been very difficult to achieve because you've had to have Haaland, right? And when I say you've had to have Haaland, I think it's been optimal to have Haaland. Now, people who have gone without him, I think have got somewhat lucky, and I think they would say that themselves, right? Because are you really expecting Erling Haaland to go 2-2-2-6? No, probably not. But now that it's far more viable, and I'm not talking about this specific Bournemouth game. That's for the video you will watch tomorrow, where I really go in depth on Erling Haaland and taking him out, etc., etc. But this is a wildcard drop for those who needed it and those who are considering it. This structure has not really been, like I said, accessible from a logical standpoint as a result, but now it is. And you can basically give yourself a floor of points each and every single game. And if Haaland doesn't go parabolic or he doesn't do very well, you're in the money, because no one's really going to be able to compete with your squad strength or get even close for all of those that own Erling Haaland. Because how often is it that Salah, Palmer, and Saka all miss? And you know what? One of them's going to hit, and a lot of people won't own one. So you'll be fine in that sense. I think Palmer, and one reason I didn't, or at least I wasn't so keen on wildcarding in 10, is because the next two fixtures may not be that good. I think you look at Man United, right? And one of the things where they were so exploitable is that space in the midfield when they press in that 4-2-4. And them not employing that on Sunday is somewhat of a likelihood, because I don't think Ruud van Nistelrooy will employ something that's made them suffer so much. And therefore, Palmer shouldn't have as much space in the middle. Then you look at Arsenal, and it's one of the reasons why I was considering potentially delaying it till 12 and then getting him for Leicester away. And you don't need to essentially break the team for him or massively restructure, because maybe the upside is somewhat limited in 2 weeks. So that's that. Saka, obviously Newcastle away, Chelsea away, not the easiest fixtures, albeit both defenses which have looked heavily susceptible. It's just the fact it's away, and Arteta's defense first philosophy is definitely manifested in his team when he goes away. But last time was away at Bournemouth, and this time obviously Saka will be back, so there's a difference there. And Salah is probably just the best pick in the game. I'm actually going to do a little section on him tomorrow, and it's something maybe you wouldn't expect, because I guess by now you know Salah is such a good asset. But I think I came to a realization that he might even be better than everyone has him down to be. So he's going to get a section on himself tomorrow. And he's got the armband at the moment. I think he's the best option this week. But again, that's for tomorrow. It's just to show you basically what I deem to be the best wildcard. There's not too many negatives attached to any of the premiums. Hence, it's difficult for me to critique it and give very balanced arguments. They're obviously very good. It's just what you get when you don't have Erling Haaland. Finally, we move on to the forward line, and we have 3 forwards here who have been exceptional value for money thus far, especially Chris Wood and Nicholas Jackson. We'll start with the most obvious, being Cunha. I think penalties, set pieces, the level of technical quality, his overall brilliance, how involved he is in the game, means that not only is he brilliant on the bonus system, but he's going to get returns at a fairly regular basis. And when he does, he will get close to hauling, or at least do very well considering what he's going to do on the bonus system. I think it's just a very secure source of points at 6.5. You're offering yourself a ceiling like you are doing with the premiums in midfield, but you're also offering yourself a decent floor. Not as good as the premiums, naturally, given his price, but still quite good. And with the fixture run, you can basically hold him for forever, and he fits in with the theme of having a squad that is built for the long term. Chris Wood's more of a short-term play. I think you look at him for West Ham at home, Newcastle at home, you think 2 defenses that aren't in the greatest place at the moment. Then you have Ipswich at home after, obviously, Arsenal away. You'd bench him for Arsenal away, because just look at the side. It's got the depth where you can do that. And therefore, you would have a Ipswich at home, and I think you can look to move on after that. It's just to capture some short-term upside. It's to capture his form. And again, given he's on penalties as well, and given the form he's in, and given how Forest are playing, fundamentally, every single play in this team is so sound. And that's what you're getting with a wildcard draft like this. You're getting a brilliant team in terms of the fundamentals. It pretty much just lacks Erling Haaland, and some of you will say Brian Mbeumo, but that's about it. And then lastly, we've got Nicholas Jackson. He is one opposite to Chris Wood, who continues the trend of building a side for the long term. Okay, sure, United away and Arsenal at home, maybe as a pair is not the best set of fixtures, but with how good he's looked, with the relationship he's formed with Palmer, with the fact that Palmer's such a great creative and Nicholas Jackson's a runner, and how he's being fed, he's undoubtedly going to get chances, I think, against both United and Arsenal. Then the fixture run after that is superb for him. For him specifically, in terms of a stylistic perspective, it is absolutely brilliant. And I think getting on him early it just makes a lot of sense when you would like free transfers down the line to facilitate the likes of Bowen, Watkins, and Isak, because they're not the easiest to get. You also have to consider maybe in game week like 18, which I know is a long time away, you're going to probably need some transfers to get Haaland back in, because you're going to have to do so at some point, right? and just making these moves will, I think, really help down the line. So that is the squad. I think it's so sound. I really like it. The only thing I would say is maybe it's a little bit Chelsea heavy, considering United away, considering Arsenal at home, and obviously it doesn't have the big man himself. And in game week 11, that's a pretty big deal when he's the best captaincy option. If you can get away with it in these 2 weeks, you are set up so nicely because you will also have a huge amount of value, I think, on your side. People will be looking to buy a team very similar to this in game week 12, and you will have all of them. I think you'll gain, honestly, close to somewhere like $1 million, which is a big deal. It really is, especially when down the line you want to restructure, move out, and pick up other expensive players like we've spoken. Now, before we finish, I thought I would touch on some players who aren't included in the side, but could potentially find themselves into a wildcard draft. Now, I mentioned, given there's no Haaland, teams will be fairly similar because you are literally just going for all of the next best alternatives. But there is obviously going to be some wiggle room, some subjective preferences. I thought I'd just address them. Jimenez and Wissa in particular, I really like Jimenez's fixtures, especially the one that's coming up in terms of Brentford at home. I think that's a really good place for him to score some points. For me, the only reason I didn't have him is longer term. I think I just trust these three guys a little bit more, especially with Wood's form over Jimenez. But he could definitely be there. Vissa could be there, but again, you look to my Brentford analysis and why I don't love the fixtures, albeit I do think maybe they suit him slightly more given the position he played. So I would understand it. It's just that Wood and Cunha exist and they are so good. And then obviously Jackson and Cunha are for the long term. Another one is Eze. Now, he could have found his way into this side ahead of Garnacho. I would have no problems with that. I really like his prospects in the immediate term. I think Palace, they beat Spurs, and now maybe it starts a bit of a momentum cycle. I wouldn't be surprised. I had a feeling it was going to happen. I had a feeling Eze was going to return. I think he's looked so close to returning so many times. He's been points dodging better than anyone. And I think it's only a matter of time before he catches fire. And we've seen it happen with other sides. It's like Bournemouth last year under Iraola. Started horribly, but eventually you kind of knew it was going to get clicking given the quality of the manager. And I think Eze will be somewhat similar there. No Trent. I would like him for the next 3. But I think with the role he's playing, it's very difficult to justify spending 7 million on him. And aside from that, I think we've pretty much covered anyone. If we haven't, please do let me know in the comments. And that is all she wrote. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you got some value out of it. And I hope it gave you some clarity on whether to wildcard or not. I'm very much looking forward to the video tomorrow where we look at everything you need to know for Game Week 10 because there is a lot, and I mean a lot, to discuss. Please do subscribe if you are one of the 50% that watch regularly and haven't done so. Please do subscribe if you're new and you enjoyed the video. And I shall see you very, very soon. Have a great day. Goodbye.